Grace and peace, beloved of God. This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson, and welcome to Shatter the Silence. Of course, our focus at this point in time is to put a humongous dent into domestic violence. Okay, so our topic for tonight is men are victims too. Men are victims too. Let me see if I can't get this straightened out here. Please share the video. You all know I don't remember to say that. I'm not as good at that as some of my counterparts who remember to say share, share, share. So I may not think of it anymore. So if I don't, then please, please, please go ahead and share the video. Last week, hey, Minister Gamble. Hello, everyone. Hi, Noreen. Last week we talked about I'm sorry, my dogs just decided they would join us. Okay, so we've done 3 of these so far. The first time we spoke with, we had a guest, and it was Lisa Alexander from Stand Up Survivor, and we talked about domestic violence overall, the overall impact of it. And then the week after that, we talked about safety planning. And the safety planning video has been viewed over 16,000 times now, and so that's pretty amazing. We're excited about that. It was a lot less than that when I mentioned it last week, but we're really, really excited about that because our mandate is a global mandate, and we are really, really determined to get the word out, not only limited to here, in the United States, but it's a worldwide issue, so we want to make sure that we address it worldwide, okay? Hi, Pam. So now normally I have help, so y'all gonna have to bear with me if you're saying stuff. I want to be able to respond to you. I'll try to wave at you when I can. Hi, Barbara, all the way from Alaska. Hey, Rosalind. So tonight we're going to talk about the fact that men are victims too, and it really has an impact in more than one dimension, and I'll go into more detail about that. All right. But we know that it's a silent epidemic even within the church. And I mentioned to you last week that we're going to be launching a private, it'll be private or closed, Facebook group with an emphasis on a faith-based population, because it's important, I think, that we establish a place that people of faith can be transparent about what they're actually dealing with. It's a scourge in the church, and it's not okay. God is not pleased with it. It does not represent him. It's not his character, and there are many reasons why it's an ongoing issue. You have many people in ministry leadership positions who struggle with this, who have a history of it, who have survived it in childhood and maybe even into adulthood and have never really addressed it. And so there's a reluctance to address it when they see it occurring in their congregation. And where that's understandable from a human perspective, we're supposed to be relying on the Lord, right? And so when we rely on him, we're not limited to only what we understand. And we're not limited to what we can accomplish in our own strength. So it's important that we hold ourselves accountable, right, about educating ourselves. I was interacting with a young lady earlier today, and she said something along the lines of, well, I'm familiar with what this is because I read about it, many years ago. So here's my thing. Even if you think you know all you need to know about it, I promise you don't. I promise you don't. Because it's something that's being studied worldwide, and so there's new information, there are new statistics to put things in better, more accurate perspective. And so it's important, number one, that we acknowledge that none of us know everything about anything, okay? None of us know everything about anything. And so it's important that we are committed to educating ourselves, and that means being open to learning and to understanding. In the past, domestic violence, if it was addressed at all, it's not been that long that it's been addressed, because when I was a little girl, it was not addressed at all. You did not talk about it. You could call the police if you want to. They're going to tell the abuser with his fist still balled up to go take a walk and cool off. And that was all that was going to happen. except more havoc when they left because the police were called in the first place. And that was the norm. You did not talk about it outside. So strides have been made in terms of us being able to discuss it. People still don't want to hear about it. Those of you who know me know that matters not to me. I've got a mandate from the Lord to do it. So fasten your seatbelt. So we're on it until he tells us to get off it. Okay. And there are so many instances that are in the media. And when you think about how many are actually finding their way into the media, then think about all of those cases that are not even being reported. Because domestic violence is underreported for both men and women, okay, worldwide, for many, many reasons. But the primary reasons are victims are afraid to seek help, because if they seek help, now they've exposed the abuser. And if the abuser learns of this, or if it's not handled appropriately, it can make things worse and even cost them their life. And so our catalyst, we've talked about Karen Smith. There's so many cases. There are cases where police officers, these people are sworn public servants. They have guns. And when they tell you to stop, you have to do whatever they say. But you have a high rate of them going home and killing their wives, okay, or committing murder-suicide. And so, my thought process as a mental health professional is this: the more stress that a person has to deal with in their day-to-day life, right? You couple that with their own history of abuse, or having witnessed the abuse of their mother or their father or their siblings or whatever, you've got a fractured person carrying a gun, right? With the same stressors that everybody else has. Typically, abuse victims aren't going to just say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm an abuse victim and this is what they did to me. There's a tendency to want to hide it, to forget about it, to, put it behind you. But I submit to you that you cannot successfully put it behind you unless you first deal with it head on. You've got to deal with it. You cannot run from it, because it's like having a yardstick, right? That is inaccurate. It's inaccurate. So if the yardstick that you move through life with, the yardstick that you make your decisions about relationships, about employment, about where you're going to live, about the path you want to take in life, if the yardstick that you are using to make these determinations is inaccurate, you will get a jacked up decision every single time. And it doesn't matter how long you stare at the yardstick, okay? It doesn't matter how you turn it. It doesn't matter if you put it down and come back to it later. If the thing that you're using to measure your choices, the things that I'm using to measure my choices and my decisions in life, if that's not accurate, if it's not true, it doesn't even matter why. If it's not accurate, I'm not going to get what I'm trying to get ever. Okay, so that leads to frustration. We're going to focus today on the fact that men are victims as well. And I belong to many Facebook groups, and there are times when, men will come into the group and they get, it's like PTSD in there. And so for them to even come into a group and acknowledge that they've experienced it is a huge undertaking. It really, truly is. The reality of it is, statistics show that they very rarely report. When they do, it's gotten so bad that they just can't do it anymore. It's gotten so bad, okay? And then when they do report, they may get ridiculed, it'll get dismissed, it'll get, you know what I'm saying? So they don't get help. So I don't know what's worse than desperately needing help, right? Finding the courage to seek help. Hey, Dr. Jen. And then being ridiculed or being dismissed or being told just deal with it, or being told, well, you're supposed to be a man, so why would you let her treat you this way? Why would you let him treat you this way? Now, for those of you who are people of faith, who are Christians or whatever, don't get offended, all right? But no one is exempt from domestic violence. So that means that even those in same-sex relationships, those that are transgender, we are all human beings. However you feel about all of that, that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about, and the emphasis for Lion of Judah Global Impact Ministries in this season, is that no one deserves to be mistreated. No one deserves to be called out of their name. All right? So there's a couple of statistics that I want to share with you. And I would appreciate it, because I'm trying to do 3 things at one time here. If somebody would, if you can capture what I'm saying, feel free to type it in the chat, okay? Here's the first statistic. Hundreds of thousands of men experience domestic violence each year. This is worldwide, okay? According to data from the National Crime Victimization Study, between 2003 and 2012, men account for 24% of domestic violence survivors. They account for 24%. Okay? Can someone type that for me? Yes, Barb, exactly. Generational learning. And those of us who are really entrenched in our faith would call it a generational curse, which is really only perpetuated by it being played out in front of us. It's played out in front of us. So this behavior has come to be considered the norm in our household. All right? All right. Somebody do that. 24% of DV survivors are men. 24%. About 1 in 7 men ages 18 and above have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. Now, when you talk about severe physical violence, you're talking about, and all of it is bad, but choking, punching, those behaviors that 9 times out of 10 are going to cause a real physical injury, okay? So 1 in 7 men, starting at age 18, which is just barely, I mean, you're not even in your 20s yet, all right? And this is a tremendous problem for even teen dating, and that's another discussion altogether. This is a far spread problem, okay? Also, 48.8%, almost half of all men, have dealt with some kind of psychological aggression. All right. Now let me just remind those of you who maybe haven't been following us the past several weeks that when we're talking about domestic violence, we're not only talking about when a fist meets a face. We're not just talking about when someone is pushed or shoved. It rarely starts that intensely in the beginning because the victim hasn't been groomed enough to put up with it. Okay, so there's a preparation process that takes place, and we could spend a whole hour on that alone. But if you're talking about an intimate partner relationship, then you're talking about most likely love bombing, where there's this inordinate amount of attention. You're beautiful, you're handsome, you're amazing, I've waited my entire life for you, and then, let's get married. Okay, now, a healthy person might be a little freaked out by a marriage proposal inside of a week or 2. But if you are a victim of domestic violence, even in childhood, that might be appealing to you because it feels like you found a safe place. The flip side of that same coin is, I know people who have grown up in homes where their families, their parents didn't fight. They demonstrated love and affection for each other. They did things as a family. And yet they find themselves in abusive relationships as well. Anybody want to fathom a guess as to how that can happen? Hi, Deborah. How can that happen? How can you have your family, you've been married 40 years, 45 years, 50 years or whatever, right? You've not engaged in this behavior behind closed doors or in front of your children. You've demonstrated for them what a healthy relationship looks like. How do they then find themselves in an abusive relationship? And for good measure, let's just toss the church in there. They grew up in church. Maybe they're a preacher's kid. How do they find themselves in that situation? Because, back in the day, they said, well, if you live a certain way in front of them, then, they'll have something to compare it to. And that's true. But we have to keep in mind the human condition, and please share this, the human condition will cause us to be curious about that is unfamiliar to us. There's something exciting. Hey, Dexter, there's something exciting, right, about exploring something that's completely foreign to you. And an abusive relationship, especially in the very, very beginning, is almost intoxicating. It's almost intoxicating. It's like it overtakes all your senses, all your common sense, everything you thought you knew, all right? And it's like this tremendous adrenaline rush, either in a positive sense or a negative sense. So even those of us who grew up in a home where the parents stayed together, they loved each other, you know, the dad went to work, the mom took care of the kids, and everybody got A's and B's in school, you are actually a perfect target. You are a perfect target for a narcissist. Why? Because there's nothing wrong with you. That's why. Plenty of supply. Plenty of supply. And because you're completely unfamiliar with negativity, right? You're completely... And if you grew up in that kind of household, you probably think that all people have good in them, which we could do a whole Facebook Live on how that's a lie from the pit of hell, okay? I don't know who started that rumor, but it is not true. The Bible declares that all of us came here a hot mess. I'm paraphrasing, okay? So that means that we don't all have good in us. Now, what I can attest to is that God has a plan for everyone's life. If you're here, if you're alive, if you're breathing, he has a plan, and it's an amazing plan, and it's to do you good, and it's not to cause you any harm. But the one complication with that is it's completely up to us to embrace that plan or not embrace that plan, right? So we may choose not to embrace that plan. So someone who someone who doesn't have a history is in foreign territory. They may believe that there's good in everybody. They may believe that if they just give them more time, if they're more patient, you know what I mean, they become a project. So people who come from a solid background tend to take on these projects, and they think that they can be good enough, nice enough, supportive enough, understanding enough to change them. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So a person who has these tendencies will be drawn to someone who has no history at all, because that's like a clean slate, and the sky's the limit. Okay? You got that solid background. You've got all this potential. You probably have a good income or the ability to get one. You've got stars in your eyes. You think everybody's wonderful. Perfect target. Or you have a history of domestic violence, okay? And it's like a shark in blood. They can smell that. They know that. They know it. Especially if, listen, and we're going to get to the men soon, but I need for y'all, men and women, to stop telling people, hi, my name is Cheryl, and I have a history of domestic violence, and this is what they did to me. And I really want somebody in my life. And I really would appreciate it if you didn't punch me in my face, if you didn't do this, if you didn't put me in a position where I had to call the police, if you didn't take my credit cards and my car keys or lock me up. You know what they'll say? That's terrible. You're amazing. I cannot believe. How could anybody in their right mind treat you that way? You don't have to worry about that with me. Fast forward, 9 times out of 10, what do you think happens? Everything you just described and worse. And the added insult is, here's the self-talk. But I told him or her that it would destroy me if that happened. I told them that I could not live through that again. Well, they're a narcissist, and they're not really interested in you living at all. That's not their concern. They're concerned about supply. And what you've done is told them exactly how to break you. You've told them how to crush you, okay? So it's really important that when we have this kind of history, that before we get in a relationship, okay, you go to AA or one of these other, organizations, and they tell you, do not get in a relationship while you are in treatment, okay? If you have a history of domestic violence, and I'm saying this as a mental health professional, okay? If you have that history from childhood or adulthood, do not get married, do not make a baby, do not get into a relationship until you go and work on your stuff, even if you feel like you don't have any stuff to work on. Because, see, this is what happens. The stuff that we need to work on doesn't pop to the surface until the conditions are right to force us to understand that something's missing, that we're not addressing something, or that something is hurting us, or we're in a negative situation and we don't understand how we got there. And so we have a tendency to wait until there's a disaster and then we want to go seek help. The problem with that is there's healing that has to take place before you can even do any real work. You have to get healed, and then that takes time, right? We can't rush that. We don't have any control over how long it takes. And so please, 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 if you are under the sound of my voice right now, and you know your mother or father was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know it was a loony bin when the door closed, you know that even though they were pastors, that it was arguing and fighting and plates being thrown and folk getting cussed out after the benediction, then you know that. Hey, Roz, go work on stuff. Get your self-esteem intact. Get a sense of direction, because otherwise what will happen is you'll gravitate into relationships where you expect the other person to fix all of that. And the problem with that is if you're a hot mess and they're drawn to you as a hot mess, guess what they are? Anybody want to guess? Anybody want to guess? They're a hot mess too. So now you got two hot messes together. All right? What am I saying? If you have a history of domestic violence at all, get some help regarding your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, the direction you want your life to take. And it's not too late. It doesn't matter how old you are, okay? If anything that you see in our post, or you read in our blog, or you see on our website, triggers something in you that, you know what, this is an issue for me. You want to work on that before you develop a relationship. Now, if you're already married, then you get to work on it while you're in it. A little bit more complicated, but it's doable, okay? Anybody have any questions about that? Any questions about that? Okay, back to men. So we talked about the fact that 48.8% of all men have dealt with some kind of psychological aggression, and we talked about why they don't report it, because they don't get help. And some of the meanest people in the world are people who have domestic violence histories. You would think, if you're from the school that everybody's got good in them, which they don't, okay? But if you're from that school, if that's your school of thought, then you would think that another victim would be understanding. Not necessarily. That victim may be full of rage and anger, and it may very well be misplaced. And if they've not addressed it, because if they have addressed it, then they won't be full of rage and anger. They will have come to grips with what they have experienced and put it in its proper place, and they'll be able to move on with life. There may be times when things pop up that remind them, but they understand that that's not where they are today, and they understand their value as a human being, and they understand what the red flags are, and they're not hesitant to step off if they see it. Okay? You'll know that you are on the way to healing, and that you're reaching a healthy place, whether you're a man or a woman, when you don't need to give an individual another chance with a scripture on top. Okay? We're supposed to be understanding and forgiving. Okay? When we step outside of the bounds of the Word of God, now we're out there on our own. God is obligated to honor what He has said, not what we wish He said. I'm going to say it again. God is obligated to honor what He has declared in His Word, not what we wish He had said in His Word about Ray Ray or Shelly or whoever. Okay? So, if we find ourselves in a situation where we are connected to an abusive person, God did not tell us to do that. He doesn't need for us to do that. The world is not a giant petri dish in which He does experiments, because He already knows everything. So there's nothing He needs to find out about us, okay? So when we find ourselves in these situations, we got ourselves there. And if you're a person of faith, and you use scripture to justify being there, and you use scripture to justify staying there, okay? Or you use the fact that someone in a position of authority is telling you to stay, which does not relieve us of responsibility, because we're supposed to do what? Read our word for ourselves, and do what? Have our own relationship with God. And this is why it is so, so, so important, okay? Bishops, apostles, evangelists, preachers, teachers, deacons, missionaries are all human. They're all human, and they all have histories. We all have a history, okay? Some parts of it we're proud of. Some of it we pray nobody ever finds out about, okay? But we're all human. And so the expectation that we have that we can go to people in leadership and get an answer that's right on target, it's not realistic. It's so important that we have our own relationship. I'm telling you, I have gotten some horrible advice. And it hadn't been that long ago. I'm telling you, horrible. From reputable people with integrity, but they're people. They're people. And they care about me, right? So their opinion, unless they're really seasoned, is going to be biased. It's going to be biased. All right? So, hey, Adrian, just know that ultimately we're responsible for our own spiritual growth, okay? And I want you to understand that men and women experience domestic violence, all right? Now, oftentimes, this is the mental health professional in me popping to the surface now. Oftentimes when we've experienced something, especially in childhood, it's like we go through life trying to fix what happened back there. Well, if I find myself in the same situation, if I recreate that situation, maybe I can get a different outcome. And we'll find ourselves doing that over and over and over again. And that just simply means we've not accepted the obvious, that that situation was broken, that we need to get to a healthy place so that that set of circumstances is no longer appealing. Okay? As I stated previously, you can tell that you're on the way to healing because you don't need to make excuses. If someone mistreats you, if your radar goes off, right? They call you out of your name. When you no longer need to make an excuse for that, you are on your way to getting better. When you can accept, that's a red flag. And 9 times out of 10, there's more where that came from. Okay? And for men and women both, stop making people your project. People don't do that. Let the one who created them work on them. Okay? Someone asked me the question earlier this week, well, can an abuser change? All things are possible with God, but he's not going to make us do anything. He's not going to make you, right? Where we choose eternity to live, spend eternity, he's left up to us. That's the most important decision we'll ever make. So he's not making us do anything else. He's not making us do anything else. He's not making us seek him. He's not making us read his word. He will allow things to happen. He will prompt us. He will remind us. He'll have someone else speak it to us. But it's up to us ultimately to accept it, right? Or not accept it. So can an abuser change? I've been a mental health professional for 30 years. I'm a military veteran. I've treated, you name a population, I have spent extensive time treating them as a clinician. And I'm going to tell you this. I have never seen one change to the point where your life is not in danger if they stub their toe 10 years from now. Right? Now, for those of us who are people of faith and say, well, you know, everybody's been delivered from everything. Everybody's been delivered from something, rather, right? None of us are perfect. We all have things in our past, and God is able. And what about people who go to prison, and then they come out, and they rebuild their life? What you need to understand, even if you want to put a spiritual lens on this, is this. Let's just say I was a domestic violence abuser, which I am not, and have never been, okay? But let's just say I was, for the sake of argument. Then I accept Christ. I embrace faith, whatever that is. I'm supposed to become this new creature. This does not involve fairy dust, by the way. This involves us working and applying the scripture and pressing in and being accountable. So it's a whole lot of work that goes into this for us, okay? We have a responsibility for this, okay? Now, I accept Christ. What you need to know is if I start reading my Bible, I start fellowshipping with the right people, the things that I'm surrounded with become more negative than positive, I'm not doing what I need to do to maintain my spiritual balance, who's going to show up under all that pressure? We call it backsliding. So for everyone that's listening to me who's thinking about a relationship or whatever, and they used to be a serial killer, they used to be a bank robber, and God delivered them, and now they a mighty man or woman of God, let me tell you something. You need to pray about who that joker is if they backslide, because you don't have no guarantee that they won't. God did not promise you that, because it's up to them. So if they decide to break fellowship with God, are you safe, or is your life now in danger? I'm going to tell you something I live by. If my well-being depends on you doing the right thing every single time, that's not a good plan. That's not a good plan. I need to be okay even if you're not okay. If you decide you don't want to be okay, if you decide, you know what, forget it. I'm not going to be a Christian anymore. I'm going to just go ahead and be a heathen. I'm going to be a heathen. I'm mad at God for whatever reason. I'm mad at God that this happened, that happened. I lost my job. This person left me. The other person left me. My best friend betrayed me, right? I'm not serving God anymore. That only leaves one other entity to serve. And if you saying that you're a person of faith, guess what? He can't stand you. And you right there. So, I'm not interested in who you are today. Bishop, pastor, apostle, archbishop, evangelist of the universe. What are you telling me he delivered you from? Because I need to be able to deal with that joker. That's who I need to be able to deal with. Because to move forward on the assumption that someone's going to stay in lockstep with God is foolish. That's foolish. That's foolish. We can't even guarantee that about ourselves. So that's foolish. And when you're talking about domestic violence, it's life-threatening. It's life-threatening. We're not talking about what kind of cake to bake for your birthday. We're talking about, will this person resort to violence if they are triggered? Am I safe? Are my children safe? Are my pets safe? Is my family safe? You understand what I'm saying? And so in a lot of these cases, when we hear about these horrible things happening, you go back far enough, and this person found the Lord. They found him and lost him at some point, because then they turned around and killed everybody. Okay? I don't know any other way to have this conversation with you than to just be frank, because honestly, it's hard when you hear about people losing their life, and then you find out that their parents were ministers, apostles, 100 million followers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever. And then we don't have discernment because we're not educating ourselves. The Bible declares that the Lord said in Hosea that his people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And as I've said before, there's a semicolon there, not a period. We like to preach that part, but there's a whole another part that we leave off on a regular basis. Because thou hast rejected knowledge. And because you have rejected knowledge, I have rejected you from being in a leadership position. Okay? So it's not just the lack of knowledge. It's why we lack the knowledge that the destruction is able to come to our house. We lack it because we don't receive it. We lack it because when someone does try to tell us, we get upset with them. You just hating. You just throwing shade. I just very much would like for you to remain alive, quite frankly. I just want you to live. I want you to live so that you can fulfill the purpose that God intended for you before you were formed in your mother's womb. That's it. I want you to live, and I don't want you beat up. I don't want you with fractured bones and a fractured self-esteem and no faith and no joy and no peace. So I'm going to tell you what I'm supposed to tell you, because I don't want to be responsible for something happening to you. I don't want God asking me, well, why didn't you tell him? I told you to do a Facebook Live and you didn't do it. So that's a conversation. And y'all know I'm not afraid of anything today. I've been through so much. I'm really not afraid of anything. But that's one conversation I don't plan to ever have. Why didn't you? I'm not doing that one. God has been too good to me. He's kept me through too much, in spite of me, many times. And so the things that I'm sharing with you, I'm sharing with you from experience. Okay, so from a clinical background, from a military background, from a domestic violence background, how to survive it, how to navigate it. You understand what I'm saying? Which really just supports that scripture. It's in step with that scripture that tells us that there's nothing that we experience that is a complete and total waste. So let's say you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with domestic violence, right? It doesn't have to be all for nothing, okay? Now, let me say this. God's not going to send you through it so that you can be a cheerleader for and be an advocate. He does not need to do that. You can go to school and be an advocate without getting beat up, okay? Let me just put that out there. It's not necessary for you to get beat up to be an advocate. It's just not. He doesn't need to do that. But what he will do is those instances in which we have not listened to him. We have rejected the knowledge, right? We are rejecting advice. We're not seeking wise counsel. We are investing too much trust in one individual. The Bible says that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. You got 2 or 3 different people telling you something about him or her. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. And you need to listen. You need to listen. If you have an uneasy feeling, well, he or she asked about getting married, and I don't anything other than a cartwheel. Why aren't you doing a cartwheel? Because on some level, something's off and you know it. If there's any hesitancy, okay? And I'm going to tell you, in my own personal life, there are certain things that if they come up, it's a wrap right there. It's a wrap while you still talking. You don't even know it's a wrap. I don't have to tell you it's a wrap. When I was 20, I felt like I really need to tell them it's a wrap. I don't need to tell them. I'm the one that needs to know. It's a wrap. I'm not doing that. I'm not going down that path with you. You're not going to talk to me that way. You're not going to treat me that way. You're not going to call me out of my name. You're not going to be screaming and yelling like a banshee. You're not going to suck all the oxygen out the room. If we wait, whoever this is for, if you wait long enough, let me tell you something. This is something that I learned. I'm telling you, it works every time. If you want to know what you're really dealing with, tell them no and wait. That's all you gotta do. Just tell them no. It doesn't even have to be anything major. Just tell them no and wait. What is the response to no? Because anything other than, oh, wow, I really hate to hear that. Maybe we can do this another time, or maybe you'll have time to talk to me another time. Anything other than that is a complete disrespect for the boundary that you just established. And that is only the beginning. That's only the beginning. Okay? Tell them no. It's a simple, just tell them no. You want to go out tonight? No, I need to study. I need to do this. I need to do that. I'm tired. Or no, I just don't desire to go out tonight. And wait. Whatever you get, there's more where that came from. Okay? There's more where that came from. All right. So we were talking about men. 29% of rapes on men were committed by an intimate partner. That could be male or female. And remember now, when we're talking about relationships, it could be a same-sex relationship, okay? And church folk getting all appalled or whatever. People are people, and nobody deserves to be mistreated. They do not. Or violated, period, okay? If we approve of their lifestyle or not, if we think something's wrong with it or not, whatever we think the cause is, where it came from, whatever. God caused it, he didn't. However you feel about it, at the end of the day, it's just wrong. It's just wrong, okay? Men are victims in about 6% of murder-suicides where the offender is an intimate partner. So 6% for men, okay? 10.4%, or approximately 11.7 million men in the U.S. have reported having an intimate partner get or attempt to get pregnant without their agreement. So let's talk about men and what men go through. And if there's any men that want to chime in, feel free. Domestic violence starts off like manipulation. Remember, we talked about that. It very rarely starts off physical. And then it escalates over time to pushing, shoving, slapping, choking, which has become such a great problem worldwide. It's crazy that now, even in the United States, in many of our states, it's a felony to even put your hands around somebody's neck. That's a felony. It's a felony charge if you choke somebody. You put your hands, because it's out of control. It's out of control. Now let me just say this, because I could do a whole Facebook Live just on strangulation alone. Okay, if you are in a situation and that occurs, obviously you want to calm them down and do whatever you need to do to get them calm so they get their hands off of your neck. Many victims, when they experience strangulation, don't seek medical attention. So even if you don't lose consciousness, you should seek medical attention. If you do and regain consciousness, then certainly you should seek medical condition. Because in my research for this, I learned that it's possible for you to die weeks later, days later, from an injury that you suffered internally when you were strangled. Okay? So it's important to do that. It's important also to know that most of the time, the abuser's not really trying to kill you today, right now necessarily, but wants you to know that they can. That they can. Okay? They want you to know that they can. That if you live or die is in their hands. Okay? Now, if you're in a domestic violence situation right now, first of all, if you ever feel like you're in imminent danger, things have escalated, fists are going through walls, you being threatened, a weapon has been introduced or whatever, I keep telling you guys, you need a safety plan. If you're going to stay with that craziness, you need a safety plan. You need a safety plan to stay. You need a safety plan to exit the actual physical departure. You need a well thought out plan for that, okay? And you need a plan after you're gone, because 30 to 90 days or so is really kind of it's a high tension area time frame for the abuser. So you're really at increased risk after you leave for 30 to 90 days or so. 30 to 90 days. Now, one young lady was telling me earlier this week that she'd been divorced from her ex for 5 years. And he almost killed her 5 years later. Couldn't find her, then went and killed his current girlfriend and one of her relatives. And this is 5 years after. So what happens if your abuser, whether they're male or female, let's say they've gotten sentenced to jail or they've gone to prison or whatever. In your mind, that 30 to 90 day period happened when the police took them away in handcuffs. In the abuser's mind, that time frame didn't really start until they got released from prison. There's nothing that they're going to do in prison that's going to make them feel any more pleasant about you as the victim. More likely than not, they're going to be convinced that you're the problem and that you started it, that you ruined their life. And so, whereas you may have had 3 or 4 or 5 years, right, of kind of peace and quiet and being able to try to rebuild your life and go forward, you have to keep their perspective in mind. That for them, it's brand new. For them, they're trying to come back and rebuild their life. They're being reminded of everything that they lost, the fact that they feel that it's your fault. So be aware of that. Be aware of that. And as I always say, do not say, okay, we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk. Now, you punched me in my face last week, and that's really not okay. It's not nice. And then you choked me the week before that. And before that, you were calling me names, and you promised that you would stop, and you didn't stop. If you do it again, I'm going to leave. Don't do that. Don't do that. Some things need to just stay in your head, okay? Do not say it. In anger, do not say it because you're trying to manipulate them at that point, because they've already established who they are. So when we have that conversation, now we're trying to manipulate them into not hurting us anymore. Which means that we're missing the entire fact that they draw strength and a sense of power from hurting and crushing and damaging. So it's not going to stop, okay? Well, he or she has a history of domestic violence. He or she witnessed their mother or father do this. They were treated like this as a child. Okay. That just means they're not ready to be in a relationship. They are broken. They're broken. They're broken. And if you find that appealing, you're also broken. Okay? Hey, Vic. Then you're also broken. Okay? So the knowledge that the Bible is talking about is not our ability to just like quote scripture, right? We have a responsibility, especially those of us in leadership, those of us with a following, those of us that we know God has anointed us and people listen to us. We have a responsibility to give them sound advice and take off the rose-colored glasses and stop sprinkling fairy dust, okay? God is not a genie. We're not rubbing a lamp here and, he's going to change Ray Ray into somebody wonderful. If Ray Ray has issues, okay, then Ray Ray needs help. And if Ray Ray has disrespected you, statistics show he's not going to get it together with you. Because in his heart of hearts, he knows he can have you without getting it together, okay? Do I need to say that again? He probably won't get it together with you. Because all of the boundaries have been crashed already. And even if you want to look at it through a spiritual lens, right? And we're talking about male or female. Even if you want to look at it through a spiritual lens, the fact that those boundaries have been violated with you, you can't start off wrong and turn it into something right? You can't pick up something wrong and then have this unrealistic expectation that God is going to bless it. Because he's not obligated to bless it. Because he did not instruct us to do that in the first place. Okay? All right? Anybody say anything? Oh, yeah, evangelist of the universe, Deborah. We get enamored with people and then we think that whatever they say is... Let me tell y'all something. I had people that I know they love me. There's no doubt in my mind that they love me. But the advice that they gave me was horrid. It was hard. And I could have done it. But I didn't do it because my own relationship with God, the Lord's voice has to be the loudest voice in your ear, no matter who else he uses in your life. His voice. I had to tell a pastor once years ago, well, I'm your pastor. I said, but you don't trump God. The Lord told me XYZ. I'm going to take my chances on what he said, okay? I know you mean well, but I can't do that with you. And this really shouldn't even be an extended conversation. You should not be trying to talk me into listening to you when I told you what God said to me. So, all right? Now, let's say you're trying to help somebody, right? And they're in a situation where they're being abused, and you're suggesting they do a safety plan. You're suggesting they connect with the domestic violence hotline, right? Or domesticshelters.org. There are lots of organizations out there with really, really amazing information. We have a blog. You can inbox me. You can call 911. And all these things that you can do, right? But if a person doesn't want to listen, you need to not give away any more than you can afford to lose. Don't lose your peace about it. Be there for them. And you stand a better chance of being able to be there if you don't go overboard with trying to convince them to leave, do this, do that, or the other. Let them know what their options are. Let them know that you support them, that you believe in them, that God has a purpose for them, that they're amazing in their own right, and that you really just want them to get back into touch with who they are. And that if you can help them, then you are absolutely willing to help them. Okay? But you can't push them too fast, because this is what will happen. You push them too fast, they're going to mess it up. And this is what will happen. I'm leaving. And then, who you been talking to? What they going to do next? So-and-so told me I should leave. Okay, so now we got more than one target. Okay? So, we're still talking about boundaries. You want to be respectful about those boundaries, okay? All right, so I told you that 10.4% or approximately 11.7 million men in the U.S. have reported having an intimate partner get pregnant, set them up to get pregnant, or whatever. Now, for those of us who would say, well, it takes two to tango. Okay, fine. It does take two. But if you have a conversation with someone, and I don't care if you're married, it really you should have the conversation before you get married. I want 10 kids. Well, I don't want none. Well, that's a problem. So, for you to arrange to get pregnant is abusive. And it's manipulative. It really, truly is. and you're setting the stage for a whole lot of resentment and angst and frustration and craziness, and you're going to probably end up raising a baby by yourself. Or they're going to have a very angry parent, which is also not good, okay? So it's abusive. Whenever you don't respect a boundary that someone has established in a relationship, it's abusive. And if their boundary is in conflict with what you want and you desire in your life, then what is that? That's God saying, this is not what you need to do, because that's not what they want to do. They don't want what you want. They're not going in the same direction. And it doesn't mean that either one of you are wrong. You're just not supposed to take this trip together, okay? And when we can accept those things and educate ourselves about these things, we can save ourselves a lot of grief. Okay. Nearly 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner to the point that they were scared for their life and safety or that of their loved ones. Stalking is abuse. I'm going to say it again. Stalking is abuse, and it's really creepy, and it's really, really potentially dangerous, because what happens from a psychological standpoint is, just checking the phone is not enough after a while. Okay, now they get in the car, or you getting in the car, and you trailing them to see where they going, right? Then you're going to sit outside wherever they went and see who comes out. You're going to see how long they stay in there. These things, and this is how the enemy slips in, it will take over your thought process, and you will find yourself rearranging your life so that you can keep up with this individual and what they're doing in their life. Okay? A person with a healthy sense of self and with an accurate sense of their own self-worth and a respect for themselves because of who God created them to be. If you're not interested, you're just not interested. Okay. All right. One way to look at that is say, well, you're just too foolish to be in my life anyway, because I'm amazing. If you can't tell I'm amazing, then you're too stupid to be in my life. So it's okay. It's all right. Go with God. That's what we need to be able to do. Instead of trying to make people want us, try to make people want to stay with us, make them want to toe the line. If you've got to go through all of that, then you're setting yourself up. Okay, so what happens emotionally from a mental health standpoint with stalking is very, very dangerous, because oftentimes it will increase to a forceful act, and people can die. Not only the target, but whoever the abuser views as the problem. It can be another man, it can be another woman, it can be a relative that they feel is speaking against them, or whatever, okay? Become a target, okay? Okay, nearly 8% of males who have reported domestic violence have been shot at, stabbed, or hit with a weapon. Nearly 8%. That's a lot. An estimated 5% of male homicide victims annually are killed by an intimate partner. Okay? So, really want you to understand that men can be victims of domestic violence as well. My advice for them is the same as it is for a woman, that if you have this history, you don't have to wait until you get into a relationship or whatever. You got issues. Come on, you got issues. You don't trust people. Whatever your issue is, you got issues because they have already been surfacing in your life, right? If we could, even in the church, learn to address things, get in front of them so that we're not constantly reacting to, picking up the pieces, right? Pretending to be healed and delivered and set free when in fact we are not. When we can walk in a healthy place, we are able to recognize unhealthy when it's standing in front of us, and the head doesn't have to be spinning around, and they don't have to be spitting out green stuff for us to figure it out. All right? This is where discernment comes in. You're able to recognize unhealthy when you see it, and you're able to step off and walk away. And you don't feel an obligation to explain why. Just disengage. The earlier this is done in a relationship, the better. Okay? In the mind of an abuser, they feel that they have invested something in you. Their time, their emotions. I don't know, they bought you a lamp. I don't know, they bought you dinner at an expensive restaurant. They paid your rent. They paid your mortgage. They did all these things. They're investing. The Bible says that where a man's treasure is, that's where his heart is. So wherever we are investing our time and our resources, that's where our heart is. Wherever we are investing, what we have worked for, what we care about, our time, something that once it's gone, we don't get it back. Whatever we're investing that in, that's a serious investment because you can't get it back, right? You cannot get it back. So unless the person that you're investing this time in values your time, right? Values your time and purposes in their heart to reciprocate, anything less than that, you've got an out of balance situation, okay? So in all of these cases that escalated to murder, suicide, these horrific acts, we talked about the preacher last week in the Carolinas that is seemingly set his house on fire with his wife and daughter in there and then killed himself as the first responders arrived. Shot himself. Okay? At what point was the point of no return reached? At what point was the point of no return reached? A day or so before that happened, he had posted, "We all have secrets," which should have been an indication to anybody that was connected to him, friends with him on Facebook or whatever, that something had shifted and something was off, right? And so we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention because we can't prevent anything. We can't support anyone if we are so self-absorbed that we don't notice that something is off. Okay? So what's the point of no return? Let's take a relationship. It can be male, female, I don't care. Same sex, immaterial to me, what it is, okay? There's a point in the relationship that you have invested so much that the other part of that relationship, that other individual is going to be offended if you break it off. So the key is to pay attention up front. Get yourself to a healthy place so that you can recognize things, so that the Spirit of God can talk to you and prompt you about what to pay attention to, right? And then you have the strength to step back and say, you know what? I'm not going to do this. If you do it before they feel, not before you feel, before they feel they have invested too much, you have a better chance of being able to walk away from that unscathed. But when we tolerate the behavior, if it's a man and he's being cursed out by this woman, she's talking loud to him, she's trying to get him to go to bed, and he's trying to live right, and he don't want to have sex before marriage, and she keeps trying to get him to do that. These are all boundary violations. It's all disrespect. All of it is disrespect. But if we stay engaged, we have given them permission to go to the next step, and go to the next step, and go to the next step. And since this has nothing at all to do with how amazing we are as victims, this entire conversation is taking place in their head. It ain't got nothing to do with you. You're not invited to the conversation. All right? And you don't get to vote in the decision that's made at the end of the conversation that happens in their head either. So in their mind, well, you know what? I've spent $100 on dinner 3 times. I spent the night over there 2 or 3 times. We an item. We a couple. And then you decide, okay, I'm breaking this off. And they think, hold up. You're not leaving me. I've invested all this time in you that I cannot get back. I have stopped seeing other people. I have bought you a lamp. I have paid your rent. I paid your mortgage. I paid your car note. Right? The cutoff is not the cutoff in the target or the victim's mind. It's the cutoff in the abuser's mind. The best way around that, this is free. I'm giving you all advice. I'm telling you, trying to help somebody. Pay for your own stuff. You're not married to them. Buy your own lamp. Pay your own car note. Do not take from someone if you can't deal with the possibility that they completely lose their natural mind if you have to tell them no about anything. Okay? So with any relationship, there's that first phone call, right? There's that first meeting at the mall or at church or wherever. And when I hear about instances where people are killed, I wonder what should have been the last phone conversation they had. What was the point at which, if they had stepped out then, they could have gotten away without the abuser feeling like they had invested so much? Okay? Don't take stuff from folk. Don't let people do what they're not responsible to do. If you're not married to them, you are not their wife, you are not their husband, you are not their responsibility, okay? Don't do that. Don't do, because you don't know what they're doing with that in their head. And they can say it's no problem. But the first time you have to tell them no about something that matters to them, it can escalate into a problem, okay? So, we're going to wrap up here. I want you to understand that men are victims too. Men are victims too, okay? One more thing. Okay, I'm a domestic violence victim, and, my parent was wackadoodle, and he was a domestic violence victim, and his parent was wackadoodle, and together we can rule the world. No. From a spiritual perspective, that's a familiar spirit. And familiar spirits attach themselves to us so that things can stay the same, not so that they can change and get better. Okay? Two broken people don't make a whole person. They do not. And so, if you come into contact with someone like that, all right, and you know you are broken, I'm going to tell you like we tell people that go to AA or NA or whatever, do not stare across the room and get stars in your eyes about somebody with the same history that you had. Because neither one of you know how to do it the right way. So now what's going to happen? What's going to happen now? Okay? Understand that men can be victims. And if they're in church, or if they were raised, especially those same examples that I gave in the very beginning, hold true. Because if they were raised in a family where there was no domestic violence and everybody loved each other and ate dinner together and took family vacations and actually liked each other, right? They may feel that they want to rescue, help, support, nurture. Bad idea. Bad idea. Bad idea. That person, the wounded person, the broken person, needs to be encouraged to go to counseling, therapy, whatever. And not until they're in a healthy place should they be entertaining a relationship. And if you're already healthy, you absolutely shouldn't be entertaining one. It's a bad idea. Okay? So, you get involved with someone who's in treatment for whatever reason. They're in rehab for whatever reason. You will absolutely circumvent their progress by interjecting yourself at that point in time. You're going to, at the very least, you are going to slow up any progress that they make because now you've become a distraction. Okay? So allow them to work on their issue. 9 times out of 10, if you have a need to rescue, when they reach the point where they don't need rescuing, you're not going to have nothing to talk about. If they need for you to be broken and downtrodden and depressed and suicidal, that's not who, God did not send them to you. They're not going to know what to do with you. They're not going to know what to do with you. When you hit a place of healing, it's going to be a problem. So then, now you have to make a decision. Do I continue getting better? Or do I stay sick so I can maintain this relationship? Okay? Everything that I've said applies to men as well as women. If they are in the church, it's really hard, to go to your pastor if you're a man and say, well, this is what's happening to me. Number one, we've got this thing that we're supposed to be covering our spouses. Covering, right? And so not exposing them, not talking about our relationship outside of the relationship and all of that. The problem with that is domestic violence, it grows, it gets worse, and intensifies in darkness, just like every other evil thing in the earth. It needs darkness. It needs for good people to do nothing. It needs for people to not recognize that they are in bondage, okay, in order to flourish. exposing it as early as possible is what needs to happen. It needs to be done in a safe manner. We need to not turn people off and shut them down. We need to understand that everybody exits at their own pace, if ever. They may never get to a place where they want to exit, okay? We need to learn how to be supportive and not say things that send them right back into the abuser's clutches, okay? That's very, 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 very important. Now, I want to touch on a couple of things. Number one, we're going to be launching a private or closed group for faith-based people, with the whole point being that we can just be candid. And it doesn't matter to me what your office is in the church or whatever, how many followers you have. That's immaterial. I really just want you to stay alive. I want you to understand who God created you to be. I want you to find your voice at your own pace. And I want you to have a safe place to be transparent, because that's what we don't have in the church. We don't have that in the church, okay? Anyone who joins this group, I'm going to be scrutinizing. Any rude, obnoxious behavior, I'm cutting you off. Anybody that knows me know I don't play that. We're not gonna have no summit meeting about it. You're not gonna be disrespecting folk and be in my space. We're not doing that. I absolutely will not tolerate it. No exceptions. Ask anybody who's known me for longer than 5 minutes. I don't. No. You can choose to stay in your situation. That's your right. And I will continue to pray for you, but you're not going to damage anybody else that God has assigned to my hand. I'm not going to have that. I'm not doing that. Okay. So we're going to be launching that. My target date for that is June 1st. Y'all need to give me some name suggestions, because I only have like 1 or 2 right now. I need some more options for names. It was brought to my attention that a couple of people have had issues with our school platform. We've got those courses about domestic violence. So I'll be working on that this weekend to try to work out those kinks, so that you can go on and enroll in the classes. And all. We've got to educate ourselves so that we can help the people around us, and in some instances so that we can help ourselves. All right, to live our best life and to be who God has created us to be. This is something that's on my mind all the time. It's something that He has assigned to me in this season. We are determined not to dishonor God. If you have an issue, you have a problem, you have a question, you just need to vent, you need to scream. Again, it doesn't matter who you are, what your position is. I'm not going to break your confidentiality. Nobody can accuse me of that. I don't do that. I'm not going to do that. Nobody will even know you talk to me unless you tell them. And then I'm going to look crazy if they mention it, because then I'll know you told them. But I'm still not confirming nothing. Okay? So if you talk to me, it's safe. I'm not going to think any less of you, to think any different of you. This is what I think. I think we all need support. We all need a safe place to be transparent so that we can heal and move forward, and so that we can navigate life successfully. One of my favorite quotes is from Harriet Tubman. And Harriet was one of my nicknames given to me when I went through officers training school, because they said I was always helping somebody get out of a jam somehow. So they called me Harriet. But Harriet Tubman said, "I have freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed 1,000 more if only they had known that they were slaves." That's how I feel about this. And this is how I feel about anything that binds us and restricts us and causes us not to live to our full potential. Anything that restricts us and prevents us from being who God has called us to be is bondage. And I'm allergic to it. And I'm all about getting people out. I live to get people out of tight places. Okay? We love you. Give me a few days to work on the online platform for the school. And I need for you all to go ahead and enroll or whatever, so we can keep moving. Again, we plan to launch the private or the closed group on the 1st. And because it'll be private or closed, people will be able to find the group, okay, but they won't know who's in the group. They won't be able to see what's posted in the group at all, okay? Inbox me any time. And we will be back next week. If there's a topic that you want to talk about, you can let me know that too. And I keep saying I'm going to give you all that number. There's a website that you can check. The National Domestic Violence Registry is a national database, okay, of domestic violence convictions. So this is true for anybody that's out there dating, thinking about dating, okay? I'm going to need you to stop being so romantic, and I'm going to need for you to get on the website and make sure they don't have a history. If they have a history, you need to be making informed decisions about who you connect to in your life, okay? Hey, Ambassador Charlotte. Hey, Tammy. All right? If you have any questions, inbox me. I love you to life. If you are in a DV situation, if things escalate, call 911, okay? And I know there's a lot of controversy about what happens when the police come or all that. You've got to get to a place where you're concerned about living yourself. And you're concerned about how your children or even your pets are being affected by the atmosphere, if you want to look at it from a spiritual standpoint, or just the chaos. Nothing healthy comes out of that, grows out of that, okay? It doesn't mean that your person is a horrible person, a monster, Freddy Krueger, or anything like that. That's not good for you. They're just not good for you. They don't see your value. They don't value you. And when you reach a place where you are healthy, that's all you need to know. Oh, you don't value me? Okay, then you're not my person. You're not my person. Because I have all kinds of value. Okay? And I have figured that out. All right? Love you to life. We'll be back on next week. If you have a topic you want to talk about, inbox me. Let me know. Okay? Please share the video because I keep forgetting. And we had like 16,000 views on one. It's like blowing my mind how many people are viewing this. Many of our viewers are in other countries. Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, Pakistan, Canada. And so we really want to boost our exposure here in the U.S. because we have a tremendous problem here as well. I appreciate you all's love and support. Share, share, share. Blessings to you.